Great. Thanks, Catherine.
Mhm.
So good evening. Tonight's session is we are looking at making sense of the preschooler. Although they can be small and tiny, they can be feisty with lots of character. And we want to share our insight with you of them. And hopefully that this lens will help us be patient in their growth and welcoming them as who they are
Oops.
and what is going on for them.
My,
There's so much action going on for them.
my apologies. I was trying to admit people and I pressed the wrong button.
That's okay.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so we are basing our presentation and we want to share the work of Dr. Deborah McNamara, who is a developmental psychologist. She's from Vancouver, BC. In our schools, the teachers, the K teachers, the K4-5 teachers, Cycle 1 teachers are all very aware and have copies of the book called Rest, Play, Grow. It's also available in French called Jouer, Grandir et s'épanouir. So it is a book that is for us an incredible resource. It is also based on the work of Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's a developmental psychologist also in BC with the Neufeld Institute, and really looking at he really started with kids, but also really looking at teens. And Deborah took it to another level of making sense of preschoolers.
Mhm.
But my favorite part is her subtitle of already one who acts like one. So you may have a 12-year-old that might look like a preschooler. You may have a somebody in your family who's a young adult that looks like a preschooler sometimes. So what we're looking at here is really their developmental age and where they're at and how things are flowing, and sometimes how maybe the growth is not quite there yet, and understanding that in different ways. So we will share some references from Deborah because she's a colleague of ours and we work closely with her. So, but because of the value and the depth of the material, but also how it is a very comfortable, easy read, and that you can enjoy some of those resources. So we will share a few along the way for you.
So there we go.
So who are preschoolers? They're very immature, and their immaturity is not a mistake, but it's a perfect beginning from where we all start. And the key is really in looking at where they're at. And if we take the analogy of a tomato plant, it starts that it has like, some prickles on it and those yellow spiky flowers. And we may wish for a beautiful ripe tomato, but the reality is when the flowers are there, the tomatoes aren't there yet. And it will take almost 3 months for a ripe tomato. Well, how long does it take for a little ones, the preschoolers, to mature? We don't reach maturity until we're around 25, 26. That's if there are no impediments, conditions are wonderful, and growth has unfolded throughout. So it would be hard for us to, actually, we would be giving them a very hard time if we would be expecting them to be mini adults when they are in development. Their little brains are in development. They will not reach full maturity until they hit 25, 26, again, if all the conditions are right. And I'm going to tell you right away, the last 2 years with the pandemic does not lead to ripe and real conditions. Even in the homes where things have been very stable and things have been good, we know that families have had a really big struggle, and it's been a very testing time for all. So we don't have optimal conditions right now. And I think that's a part that we need to very much take into consideration, because it is not their fault. It is not their fault that we have not been able to provide the ripest of conditions for our students. Their entry to school is very different than a few years ago, kids that entered into school. So we must be cognizant of that, but not make them responsible for it. It's not their fault. And for parents, it's not your fault. There's so much going on. I really believe that everybody is doing their utmost. And at the same time, the reality is it's been very difficult for all. So I think when we understand that the conditions haven't been ripe, is then we can have more compassion and understanding from where the students are and where your children are. And we need to really, it takes time, patience, and guidance from all the adults who care for them. So it really requires that team effort. So that's why we were very happy when we had requests from the schools and from Katia, who's our transition officer at Katia de Rainville, our transition officer at Riverside, who asked, could we do a presentation with parents regarding making sense of who are preschoolers and where are they at. And we need to really get insight on where they're at in their development so that we can then be well positioned to help them, support them, care for them. And I'm going to say, appreciate them in the colors of each who they are, because that's really what it's about. That's how we're going to help them grow, is if we understand them very well and we're able to take that angle of support. Yes, it's not easy. And yes, it can be very frustrating sometimes, but at the same time, this is exactly where we can help and make a difference.
Mhm.
So they're designed, how are they designed developmentally? Because we're going to look at how are things unfolding with them, what is working well, what are some of the impediments, and what do we see? Like, oh my goodness, okay? They have big emotions. They only have big emotions. They don't have tempered behavior, not yet. They're not developed there enough yet. And that will only come between the ages of 5 to 7. But even now, I'm going to say those were under optimal conditions. So we need to not be looking at 5 as one of the markers. It's more like a 7 to 9, because initially we were saying 5 to 7. And I'm going to say right now, honestly, it needs to be more like a 7 to 9. They have big emotions. They have one thought, one feeling at a time. So their brain has a very, very little filter, and the immaturity is exactly there. That describes them at the best. They have big emotions, one at a time. So when they're upset, it's like the world stopped turning on its axis. When they're excited, it's like they're overflowing with excitement. When they're anticipating grandma coming over and they're like, it's like they're all over the place. It's like, and often I hear parents say, like, it's just too much, Martine. Like, it is too much. Like, the energy is, and this is exactly who they are. There's nothing wrong with them at that point. It's, we're looking at, this is who they are. Preschoolers have big emotions. The other thing is, when they're tired, oh my goodness, the big emotions go all over the place. It's even worse. So we need to understand that. How can we take the lead and make sense of what they need so that we then provide the best conditions to help them be at their best in their mini developed stage, because they're in the right place. Their brain is working well. It's just sometimes not growing as fast as we would like. I was at a meeting today with a parent of a student in K4, and the child is growing, and we're seeing beautiful changes, and we're seeing the growth, but it's just not as fast as we, all the adults, would like to see it happen. So this is where we need to remind ourselves, we need to be patient. They are working very, very hard. No wonder they're exhausted and they fall asleep at different places, and when they're overtired, how the emotions just stretch out in many, many, many colorful ways. And I'm sure that you've seen many of those at home. And when you're out in the community or at school, we see it. So we need to understand that the big emotions is just part of it. They don't have a temper meter of that we can bring it down and make it more socially appropriate. When they're done, they're done. When they're excited, they're like big, big, big excitement. And when they're afraid, they're very afraid, and they need to cling on. So another area that really describes them where they're at developmentally is that for them, fair is they get it all. What do you mean share? Share only happens when there's an adult orchestrating the situation. You walk away, and it doesn't take very long before that orchestrated behavior shifts to what is natural for them. It doesn't mean that they're not trying. It doesn't mean that they weren't listening. It means that the orchestrated behavior part is just, it's done. It's worn out. And instinctively, intuitively, is they're like grabbing, they're taking. They don't have all of the words of, excuse me, I'd like to have those extra blocks to build my tower because I'm not finished building. The kid next to them is, they're just grabbing, but there's no malicious intent. It's just, what is fair is they need it, they take it, and they build. So what's the problem? The fact that they're taking from somebody else's construction is completely out of their scope, because their brain can't see the two sides of a situation yet. And that's really the part where it hasn't developed yet. It doesn't mean they're not considerate. They look like they're inconsiderate, but it does not mean that. It just means their brain isn't developed enough yet to be able to hold that. That will come later when we see that maturation unfold. So we're going to say like a 7 to 9, 6 to 9. Okay. And it will come, and you will work it and prime it. And that's okay. That's our job as adults and parents with kids. But we cannot expect that on their own, if there are 3 cookies and 2 kids, it doesn't mean they're both getting 1.5. That's our brain. Theirs is chocolate chip cookies, my favorite. I get them all. And if they can grab them and shove them in their mouth, all 3 at the same time, they will do it. Whoever's the quickest will get it. Okay. Or they might get 1 and 1, but after that, yes, I mean, the third one is a grab. The third one is a grab for sure. And they're going to think it's fair no matter what. So I think there's a part where we also need to have some humor with that. We need to be very playful and try to get ahead of it. And I see many adults in the schools where it's quite the dance to see teachers and technicians and attendants working with 4-year-olds where you are trying to help them learn to share. And we want to teach that. But there's a part where developmentally, they can't do that solo yet. So we will orchestrate it and we will do a lot of that in schools. But at the same time, we need to understand that mechanically, developmentally, their brain is just not there yet. So we can work it, but it doesn't mean we are actually priming all of that. The same way that if we want that tomato 3 weeks after we planted the tomato plant, we're not going to get that tomato. We need to give it the time to grow. The other part is they don't like to be told what to do. You can't make me. And at school, we get the, you're not my mommy. They're very close to their attachments, but it's also, I do it myself. They want to do on their own. And then what gets confusing is that there are times where you know they're able to do something on their own. And then it looks like they're behaving like they can't, or they don't want to. And you're going like, am I out of my mind? I know they can open that container with their fruit in it. I know that they can do this. And then it's like, no, can't do it. And the issue is not being able to do the task itself, but emotionally not feeling able to do it then, or needing the emotional support. So it's that combination of bringing it together. And it's not what we need to hold on to. It's not because they are able to do a task, like mechanically they can do those steps 1, 2, 3, that it means that they're always available and in a position and have that desire and the energy to do it themselves. So there is much to be gained on our part, that when we see that they're not in the frame of mind to lean forward and to go into doing it, if it's something like shoes, tying shoes, and that becomes a big challenge for some kids, is we can help them do it. You do one, I do one. Oh, let's get started. Let's see who finishes first. The more that we are playful with it, the more they will make headway. The other thing is the more practice they get, the more competent they feel. And then the quicker they are and the more able they are. But we need to remember that when they start getting upset about it, it's not most of the time, it's not about the actual task. It's about not wanting to do something or not wanting to go to the next step. If putting on the shoes means I'm leaving to go somewhere else, the emotion is around the not wanting to leave you, or the not something they're not comfortable or don't feel like doing right now. It doesn't really have to do about the actual task of tying the shoelaces. So there's a part there, and they don't have the language to say, I'm really upset right now. I'm feeling sad because I would really like to stay home and cuddle, but you're telling me I have to put my boots on to go to school. They can't process all of that. So they just get, no. And then you're going, we need to go. And the more you try to push to go faster, what happens? They buckle down. They're like, they're pressing the brake, they're yanking the handbrake, and then you get the crisis. And it's one of the worst ways to start the morning, because you're like, oh my God, can't do this, not every day. So how can we turn it into being playful so that we shift the energy and we work at filling them up with the support? So at times, so key for us to remember that it's not the task that they don't want to do, it's facing the separation or the shift, the transition that they're not emotionally ready to do in that moment. And if we can support them there, it can make a huge difference with handling transitions or getting them to do certain things.
Already.
If there's anything you want to add there, Catherine, this is one of my, go ahead.
Sure. I was kind of thinking, to your point about the third picture. Sometimes, children, I always make the analogy that for them to feel loved, the young children have a very short cup. And so that cup gets emptied very fast, and we need to fill it very often. And so sometimes children will will not do something, not because they don't want to, but they want to feel taken care of. And so, for example, zipping the coat in the morning, sometimes they feel that, that's the way that mommy or daddy will show their love, to zip the coat. So it's not that they can't zip their coat. They just want to have that extra little, attention or affection from mom and dad to be able to help them zip the coat. And the more that we try to push them to become independent, the more we focus on that, the more they feel like, well, mommy and daddy's not taking care of me. And we need to be careful that at that age, they still very much need mommy and daddy and siblings and adults to take care of them. And that we need to trust that by taking care of them, we're not babying them. This is what's going to give them the want to actually do it themselves afterwards. And so it's
Mhm.
a bit of an opposite logic, where we think the more we try to make them do it themselves, that the more they'll become autonomous. And it's actually the opposite. The more that we fill up their cup, the more they're feeling good about themselves and they'll want to do it on their own. So I just kind of
Mhm.
wanted to add that piece.
No, that's a good piece. And it's also another example that I've often used with parents is that when kids are young and they start walking or they're feeling upset and they want to be picked up and carried. And
Yes.
if we pick up with generosity and hold them and hug them and feel them, and how many times have I seen dads shift them on their shoulders and carry them for a bit? And then soon you get the put me down, walk by myself. I want to do it. But when a kid is asking for us to pick them up and we say, no, you can walk on your own, we get more upset. We don't settle, we don't meet the need. And then we usually get the clinging and the grabbing and then like the full meltdown. But the key thing is the child is able to walk. Both children are able to walk. But the more that we feel them emotionally, then the
Mhm.
more that there is that desire to want to and to stand on their own. So it's like having that home-based safe place where you can leap forward from because you've been filled up again. So the holding, the hugging, sitting them on your shoulder is again is like Catherine's analogy of fill that cup, fill that cup. They only have a small cup. They don't have like a big water jug, that often adults were carrying to work, to have water for a chunk of the day. Their cup is tiny. It's like the little sipper cups, and we need to fill them up.
Mhm.
This is one of my favorite cartoons where, here he is with, the muddy shoes and the water and everything. And it's like, of course I'm acting childish. I'm a child. And this is sometimes where we forget because we
Yeah.
so want the independence and we so want them to, be polite, to be appropriate and to be clean and to not make a mess, that it's like we forget kids need to make a mess. Like they learn so much through that. The new curriculum is really based around play, and we're like going, yes, thank you, this is what preschoolers need. Our kindergarten kids need play plus plus plus. So we're very excited about some of these changes.
Talking about needing to play.
Talking about needing to play and fundamental needs for kids, and the top three, and there are many, but the top three that can lead us to really priming that growth and getting things like moving and flowing, because for growth to happen, emotions need to flow. So they need to play. They need to practice life in a space free of consequences, where it doesn't matter, like things don't break for real. They break for fun. We're in play, that they take on roles, they try things out, and they get that opportunity to make things work in different ways, and then whoops, discover that some things don't work. And when they're playing, that's their equivalent of, like for us, the equivalent of work, where we invest lots of energy. So in their play, they are making sense of their world. They are trying to figure things out. They are learning to do different things side by side. And sometimes they play on their own and sometimes they build in. And then you see that, that playing together, and you see that shift in growth over time. And I'm sure that for those of you who have your children in K4 and in K5, is you're seeing shifts from how they're playing now and how they were playing in September. There are differences. And this is where we see the growth. Now, all of this hard work during the day means they need to rest. They need time of rest. They need to have a rest at school, but they need to have good rest at home, where they come to rest so that they can really, French we say, se déposer, so that they can really relax, that the body gets to really settle down, because kids are busy, 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 busy. They're moving, they're talking, they're doing, they're climbing, they're busy. but the rest is so key because it helps to settle the brain. And with that comes the physical growth. So we need our kids to have that break. Also, that if we overstretch their energy and they get not enough rest, we are guaranteed lots of behavior and tantrums. They cannot manage their emotions when they're tired. The other thing is we need to come back to, how are those emotions? We only have big ones with preschoolers. So if they can't manage them big, it's going to make a bigger mess. It's going to make a bigger situation. But the key thing is we want to be able to make it more manageable for them. The other part is, and sometimes adults are really not comfortable with this, is they need to have their tears, and lots of them. Why? Oh, there are so many things that don't work for them.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. What do you mean I can't have everything? No, I don't want to wait my turn. They want everything. They want it now. The tears are the outward manifestation of the adaptive process that is working. The adaptive process is one of the processes in the child's brain that helps grow them. And this is like a muscle that needs to be exercised. So when kids cry, I'm not talking little tears like upset, got caught for something. Okay. I'm talking good tears, the deep tears, the sorrow. They think their world is going to stop and the big heaving cries. And this is where we say we need to hold them in it, let them flow. No, we're not always comfortable with it, but how key and important to make space for that, to make it safe, to not shame them, but support them. And if there are older siblings and they go, oh, you're a crybaby, we say, no, she's very upset. There are big tears, big emotions, and there was just too much for that little body to hold. It needs to come out. And this is one of the healthiest things that can help prime further emotional growth. So we need to be very cognizant of that. And like I said, some adults are not comfortable. We need to take up our relationship with tears because this is one of the best gifts that we can give our kids. It's also one of the best gifts as a parent to allow yourselves. Having preschoolers, oh man, not easy. When do you also need rest? Oh yes. And do you need to play? Oh yes. And the key thing is we need it as much as our kids. For us, it becomes a sense of relief. For them, it's their fundamental need to grow.
If I may add, Martin, sometimes when I'm working with parents in my private practice, I realize that the good intention of the parent for the child to be happy, right, and the guilt on the parent to want to fix things and for the child to feel better, and sometimes just shifting a little bit the way we see tears and understanding that tears actually is what will make the child feel relieved and will feel better after they've had their tears. And so it's not about us having to step in and fix it. It's about letting the tears fix it for the child. And when parents realize that no, they don't have a responsibility to stop the tears to make the child be more happy, it removed such a pressure, to have to step in and to change things. And now, like especially those parents that I've worked with, that their children are having a lot of tears and a lot of challenges. Now parents are celebrating the tears because they know that if the child's able to cry, then that means that they're not holding it in. And it means that they're expressing it, and that the less the child has tears, the more that they're hardened and will come out in behavior. And so it is a celebration to see your child having tears.
And the other part too is that the tears will help bring some softness, but it is, how can I put it? We need to just hold them in it. And I like that we don't need to fix it. And we can help put words saying, I see you're very sad. And then sometimes I go, no, it's a very big sad. How big? And help them go, how big is it? And it's a very, very, very sad. Okay. And the more that we can help put words to it, it'll be very interesting how they take up a relationship with those words and start to have language of, there's a big sadness in my heart. I feel like my heart's gonna crack. No, it's gonna explode, and when they're able to name some of that, you're going like, yes, because the child is in touch with their emotion, but they're becoming cognizant of how it feels in their body. And then there's, oh, that's growth. Like we're going, woohoo, yes, because that's exactly what we want to see. But they need to be able to express it and feel it and put names to it so that they can then be able to take up a relationship with it. And then we can get to how can we share and do things together. I often make the analogy of emotions. We need to welcome and invite them all the same way that we invite and we want colors of the rainbow, and how we need all colors. We can't have just yellow equal happy all the time. Can you imagine if our entire world was yellow all around us? It would be glared like, oh, but too much. So we need the colors. And you know what? The reality is some kids are more pastels. They're more soft and they're easier to manage. And others like, whoa, man, bright, bold colors, with lots of torque. And my message there is, you know what? Love and appreciate your child for who he or she is, and all of it and all of them and who they are and their personality. It is a treasure to unfold. And you know what? Not always easy, but years down the road, you'll go, I would do it all over again. And it's okay that when you're in it, you're going, who said yes to this? Because parenting and preschoolers, not easy, but hold on. Okay. So we have some resources here that are from Deborah McNamara that we want, and Catherine will bring us to her website after to show you some other tools and articles that can be very interesting and helpful, and some very nice reads and very supportive of parents and all that you do. So we're looking at the preschooler personality. This is an infographic that Deborah has covered. And we have looked at some of the pieces that speak to who the preschoolers are in their personality, but this will give you some more information. Deborah also, she has the book Rest, Play, Grow. She also has a children's story called The Sorry Plane, which really gives a very beautiful message about not forcing apologies, because if they don't feel it, it comes out very mechanical. And what is a way of trying to nurture and set the stage and compensate for a child, either doing a wrongdoing or being rude or being rough with a friend, of how can we work at building the context that a child will come to feel and want to apologize on their own, and not be a mechanical sorry because the adult has told them to do so. So I think there's a part here that can really be interesting, that can be accessed here. The book is called The Sorry Plane. We see the image here, but you will also see it on Deborah's website. And then another area that is very interesting to look at is, what does a good attachment look like? And often historically, we were hearing attachment really based on baby bonding and moms nursing babies. We are looking at something very different. And this is something that applies to moms and dads, where it is looking at the roots of attachments that we develop with our children and how they develop sequentially over 6 years, but also how those roots, the deeper we have the attachment roots with our children, the more that they are able to be who they are, but also manage when they are not physically with us. And I know that we have a number of students in K4 and K5, and we also see it even in grade 1, where kids are coming to school and their attachments with mom and dad aren't quite deep enough yet. And they struggle with the time away from mom and dad, and their missing is big and it's huge. And sometimes we need to put in additional support and really do some coaching with moms and dads to say, how can we help that go deeper so that when they're not with you, they don't see you, is that they can still feel that they're connected with you, even though they're not physically with you. So Deborah has an infographic with that, but she has a whole chapter in her book that I would strongly recommend that you have a read. It's a very comfortable read, but also throughout her book, I want to share that Deborah puts in a lot of anecdotal pieces from her work in private practice with parents of young preschoolers. So a lot of those stories you'll go like, oh, Jacob is like my Sarah, my goodness. So you will make a lot of links there, and lots of funny anecdotes from parents also in there. So you'll enjoy the read.
Wonderful. Give me a second. There we go.
So why is play so important? Play is the terrain to help grow the brain. Play is trying things out. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be perfect. We don't even need, I mean, having some materials and like access to the kids that they can pick up and go into play is really, fun, and it kind of sets the stage. But play will be the terrain where they go in and feel and try. And the key here is really that we give them, like, we provide the invitation, we provide the time and space. We don't need to be super involved in their play. We can set the stage, and Catherine in her part will speak to, things that we can do at home, and there's a lot that we can do that we can be playful. But here we're looking really at that part where being in the play mode will really be the area where their brain will grow most, because they're trying it out, they're working it through. It's also when you're in play, you're not feeling vulnerable, you're not feeling scared, you don't feel that something bad is going to happen. You are in the play mode, so you might be playing out a scary something, but it's not the same as being scared, being startled. So there's a part here that really helps to set that terrain for them, for that brain to grow. And the more that the brain grows, it promotes emotional well-being, because again, they can be loud, they can be, they can be crying, they can be doing different things in their play. And basically what it is a channel for that emotional expression to come out. In older students, we will often talk and recommend like drama, to go into drama, to do role plays, to do skits. And it's so interesting when we offer different materials of hats and different things that kids put on, and different big glasses, and just to see how they go into a role very easily. We see it fun with the young kids, but with the older ones too. The other thing is that when we're in the play mode, it really helps to create strong attachments. It helps to build those connections to the people around us. When we're playing it when it's like with mom and dad, is deepening those attachments, but also when they're at school with peers, it's a way to come alongside. And it's not in the play, there will often be a hierarchy of roles: the police officer and the person who's being arrested, and like the chef and the one who does the dishes. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're bossing them around in a negative way. When they're in the play mode, it is normal that there is hierarchy, but nobody is getting hurt, and nothing serious is happening. But the hierarchy is quite interesting. I remember visiting Deborah in Vancouver with her daughters, and her youngest became the queen with a cape and the sandals she could hardly walk in, with the tiara. And she was the queen, and her older sister of 3 years was the servant and had to be on her hands and knees. But it was just a riot to see the play, because they just got out their stories and their frustrations, but it was all in the roles. But to see that youngest one with the cape and the sandals and the tiara and the whole bit, and she was like, and you must listen to me. But it was just, when they're in that, is that playfulness, but it's that trying it out. And yeah, there is some mimicking, but it's, I mean, when we see it, it's funny, it's beautiful, and just to see what it unfolds. But it primes the attachments of playing together, the switching those roles, and having fun. Now, didn't mean it always worked out well, but yeah. And so when we're looking at playing, is we talked about playing out emotions, and one of the things is really bringing alarm into play. We all have an alarm system, and plays like a release valve. It allows the emotions to move through. And what are some of the different plays that we can do? Playing with monsters, being the monster, scary stories. If they're creating them, they're one step removed. It's not like they're living it and it's coming at them. Pretending to be scared. We have kids that were playing COVID, during like the first part of the pandemic. We were here and we're playing COVID. Oh my God, COVID tag. And it's okay. We're worried. We were apprehensive. We don't understand it all. What does it all mean? Kids are playing out their fears. They're playing out their alarm and anxiety. They're playing hospital. They're playing being sick. They're playing being everything. It helps to work through the alarm.
Yeah. My daughter's two favorites was The Floor is Lava. And so that's one that she loved to play. And the other one was Hide and Go Seek. and I used to I used to scare her when she would find me, and she used to love that.
And that's a fun way of triggering the alarm
Yeah,
system, but also you finish off after with your hugging them, So
that's
you
it.
startle, but you hug. The other thing we have to let parents know is that if you play hide and seek, you have to find them.
Yes.
You have to. A child who you say, finished, not coming for you, feels abandoned. So even if you're in the play mode, you need to finish the game, mom and dad, okay? You must find them. You can say no more after, but you have to find them. And it's funny how when you say, oh, I don't know where they are, and the kids will be screaming, over here. And it's a riot because they have to be found. They think any spot is the best spot. Even if they're hiding in a bathtub with mirrors around it and you can see them, they don't think you can see them. And they're screaming at the top of their lungs because they have to be found.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely, but a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And it's interesting how even as kids grow up, they will still want to play hide and seek. And kids adapt the game with, we play hide and seek in the basement at night with flashlights, and some take it out into the backyards and forests and stuff. But again, you need to make sure that anybody playing is found, no matter the age group. That's a huge attachment piece there. Taking frustration into play. This is one that I see lots of, but I love to see, because when kids are taking it out through their play, there will be less in real life. Okay. So playing out the impulses to make things work. And some kids love to make things perfect. They like to do puzzles. They need to align things. They need to put things into rows. They need to put things organized. Some are big into constructing and crafts. Now, this doesn't need to be perfect. They're building and it's just going, rhythm of jigs and contraptions, and they're building and they're like very engrossed in what they're doing. And you're going, yes, they are working through a lot of stuff there. Building robots, Legos, blocks, anything building, go 3-dimensionally. This is where, as with young kids, when my boys were young, was the recycling bin. By the time things got into the recycling bin to go to the curb, it had been extremely well played with, banged up, scotch taped or something, whatever. But many of things had been done with it because it was like we could get so much play out of it. And it was, it went, by the time it got to the curb, it was usually the cardboard was too wobbly to hold anything, but yes. So, it doesn't need to be that we always buy things for them to build with. Let them have what's around and kind of put it aside. I wonder if we could do something with this and leave it there. So when children can't make their worlds, just our last
Sorry.
comment, Catherine. That's okay. So when children can't make their worlds work, let's give them a chance to make other things work. And sometimes, kids will be very frustrated. They don't like it that you have to go off to work and then they're going off to school. They wanted to be home to play. So can we make it that there are things when they come back, we will build together. We're going to have those things. I wonder what you're going to make. Think about that during the day. Oh my goodness, I'll think about that too. So we are both thinking, but holding the child close in our mind, but for them to be bridging them after to get to coming back home and being able to go, what are we going to do? Taking frustration into play even some more, I'm going to say playing out the impulses to attack and destroy. And sometimes people say, Martine, are we encouraging this too much? It's going to come out. Remember, big emotions, the more it piles up, the frustration, it is going to come out. If we work at it through play, there will be less in real life. This is what we need to remember. Think of it as feeling nausea in your system, and until it gets out, you don't feel better. It needs to come out. Again, the more that there is emotional expression, that there is movement, we get growth. So this is where the tides of emotions, we need to say, okay, we can try and frame some of the where and when it's going to happen, but know that it needs to happen. So that's one of the key things. So destroying and demolishing. How can we do that? It can be with cardboard boxes, pileups. It could be with, snow structures outside right now. But there needs to be an okay for making and destroying. Now we are making and we are destroying what we make, unless there's two of us making and we're both going to destroy together. Chances are somebody's going to get in there faster. Okay. So it's like, be ready, beware. Then you will have more frustration. Hitting and throwing. We hear it with the snow right now so much. And I'm like, excuse me, can we set up a space where they can throw snowballs, not get hurt or hurt others? So can we have targets on the wall, not where there are windows? And can we be aiming and throwing? They need to have the throwing energy come out of their bodies. How can we do that? At home, do you have a area in your basement? Do you have softballs that can be thrown? If you have suction balls, they're lots of fun because not only do they get the throwing, they need to then pull really hard to get them back. Kicking and screaming, it's going to come out. So can we find ways of doing where they can get that? We used to play, who's the loudest bear in our house, but somebody's downstairs and somebody's upstairs. They're going to scream. So, or do it outside, depending on if the weather's good. But there's a part where if we channel it and we're having fun with it, then there will be a lot less of the tantrums and the screaming coming out when we don't want it. Okay. So the more that we can bring it into play, it really helps. The war games, attacking games, play fighting, again, the rough and tumble is okay. There needs to be a start and a finish. But if we provide a space where that can happen, it's okay. What we need to is, for me, the main rule was no face. No face. There's a start, there's a finish, and we can play that. But the reality is, if we don't give it a time and a place for that to happen, it's still going to happen and people will get hurt. So there needs to be parameters, and that's how we can really support them. I'm not saying we want this to be permitted all the time everywhere. No. However, if we're not putting it out in one way, we need to help channel it in another way. We need to hold on to the fact that this energy must be released for growth to happen. Piling it up is like building in toxicity in the system. It needs to come out. So the play, when we're taking frustration into play, it will reduce levels of frustration and it will decrease aggression and violence in real life. So this is an investment forward. It doesn't mean it's always, we can hopefully have a lot of fun with this, but at the same time, as if we're seeing bouts of aggression and violence and what they're doing, is we need to say, how can I help get some of this out so nobody gets hurt? Because we don't want anybody getting hurt. So, but how can we do it? And this is where they're not yet developed enough. They don't have the capacity when they're very frustrated to not smack the one in front of them. Okay. Yeah. They don't have that capacity to hold back. If we're putting blocks away together and I want to put the big one away and you grabbed it in front of me, they're going to smack you with it because they wanted it. So the key is not, it's not that they're intentionally wanting to hurt. No, I want that block and I took it, but they don't have the capacity to think twice or, oh, I shouldn't be hitting with the block, or I should have said, oh, I want to put it away. Give it to me, please. No, like that part just, it's not there yet. It hasn't developed, and there isn't something wrong with the child. It's they're not developed at that point yet. So this is the piece we really need to hold on to, really see that it's a developmental piece. They're not there yet. So adults need to be a step ahead for some things as to orchestrating the environment, but also orchestrating the conditions to help get some of this expression out.
All righty.
After we get it all, we should be exhausted.
Exactly. But I appreciate that you've spoken about the fact that, first of all, the aggression, to not be shocked or surprised that it's there. The fact that there's so many things in their lives that they're struggling with. They're not, old enough for certain things. They're not agile enough for certain things. So there's a lot of frustration at that age. And then you combine with the fact that they don't have the filter. And so the two together makes a perfect storm for them to, act out.
Absolutely. Totally. And I think, Catherine, one of the pieces I'm just thinking, as you're saying that we could have added to the presentation, is to say how key it is for us to help them with naming the emotions. To say, you're very frustrated right now. This is not working for you. This is difficult. It's frustrating. And to get the kids to say, I'm feeling frustrated. And it brought back a memory of when my youngest was like 4.5. And he was working both languages. And there was one day where it was something that wasn't going to happen. And he was like, I'm all frustrated, frustrated avec toi. And I'm like, wow, I could tell. But it was like, I'm like, yes, we are getting both languages. Oh my God, it's coming out. but he was like red, stomping, and I'm like celebrating, going, Yahoo! But at the same time, I knew how this was the beginning of like, oh my goodness, the fruit is starting to come out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was totally done with me. But at the same time, I'm going, okay, that's good. I can handle that. I see that this big scene means there's growth. And then with the no, it's not going to happen, was going to tears
Right.
because it wasn't going to happen. And taking the time, and sometimes we don't really have the time, but when we can, is to give that space of, I see you're very sad. You wanted it to work out. We're not going. And to just like, so it went from frustration to tears, but this is what we need to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exhausting sometimes
For sure, for sure,
to
for
bring
sure.
us back to sleep.
That's right. Yes, let me get there. And so, I mean, you did touch upon it a little bit, Martin, in one of the earlier slides about this, the need for them at this age to sleep.
Mhm.
And first of all, I think there's definitely a physiological need. I mean, if we were to look, I know there's out there on the internet like these charts where they show by age how much number of hours of sleep that they need per day. And so at that age, still they need so much sleep, and how important the nap time is for them. And that's where it's tricky, right? Because some children have a hard time napping in other places. There's movement around. There's a lot of other children around, and so the napping can be difficult. But some children, on top of it needing it at that age, some children do need it more than others. And so to
Mhm.
be able to respect the level of sleep that each child needs. And so I'll just read this. And so the proper slumber is essential for child growth, performance, development, attention, and overall healthy emotional state. And so we need to understand, I mean, even for us adults, I mean, I don't know about you, Martin, but I know for me, if there's been a couple of days where I haven't slept enough, oh my goodness, I mean, being grumpy, not being able to focus, like my daughter just came back from a weekend where she stayed over at a cottage, and they had fun and they were playing, and she didn't sleep enough. Today she is so off. She forgot her snow pants going to school. She came back. She absolutely needed for me to make a snack for her right away. She had no patience to wait. And this is all because of the lack of sleep. Um, and so important. But I want to widen a little bit here, more than just the slumber. I think that we need to understand that children in general, it's not just about the sleep. I think it's also about creating some bubble time. And so you notice
Mhm.
here on the left-hand side of the slide, there's a few key elements here. And so having time where there isn't any screens. I mean, I know with the pandemic, and I'm the first to admit, with my 11-year-old, she spent way too much time, that more than I would have wanted, on the screen. But we don't realize, from the brightness of the screen, the blue light, to how quickly the imagery changes when they're watching a show, to if they're playing video games, with their siblings, the overstimulation that the screen time can give to a child. I mean, I've had parents that I'm working with in private practice, that we even cut back screen time by an hour, and that made a huge difference. And so I know that screen time is considered, normal nowadays. All children do it, parents do it too. I mean, I even see it in restaurants where everybody's on their phones. Um, and so it's not because it is something that we see all the time that it is something that is necessarily natural and healthy. And so we need to remember that for a 4-year-old, we need to limit their screen time. They do not have the capacity to limit themselves. If it was up to them, they would be on it all the time. I mean, I see it with my 11-year-old. And so it's important that we have some moments where we could have some downtime, where we're just playing with whatever's around. And it is not about watching a show, not about playing a game on the screen, a video game. It's really about having one-on-one without the screen. The other piece is, Children also need bubble time. They need quiet time. Like I remember, working with families that had twins, or even working with families where there's, siblings that are close in age, and that they're either sharing a room, or that they're constantly playing together, and then they're always in each other's spaces, and then they're getting into arguments and pulling away, the same toy that they want to have. And I've mentioned this, often, that it is important for them to have some alone play, to have some bubble time where they could go and even create a fort, and they could go hide themselves with a flashlight and have nobody there, a bit of downtime. It could be where a parent or one adult can read to them, just do some cuddles, and being able to establish that moment. The other piece too that I think is important, because I'm looking at the imagery here, is thinking about bedtime routine. And so, establishing things in a certain sequence that, the child knows around what time they're going to bed. Now, when they know that they're going to bed around a certain time, that they know that before they go to bed, that they're there to brush their teeth, get ready for bed, put their pajamas on. Talking about screen time, that they don't have screen time right before bed. That is probably the worst time for them to have screen time right before bed, because of the blue screen overstimulates them and makes them even more excited. And so not having a screen time at that point, having that downtime with whom, mom or dad or whomever, and being able to cuddle, having some quiet time where there's some silence, dimming the lights, maybe there could be a bit of massage, soft music, and then helping them to bridge for the next morning. Because the thing, and we'll talk about this in a few slides ahead, is that nighttime is probably the most difficult time for children. It is scary, it is dark, they're by themselves, and that's when they feel alone. They feel separated, from mom and dad, and it is so hard for them to spend night alone. I mean, I don't know for you, Martin, but I remember my daughter getting up once, twice, mommy, another story, mommy, I'm thirsty, mommy, I have to go pee. All of the excuses come out because she doesn't want to be in her bed by herself. She wants to still be with me. And so one of the ways that I would help her is to say, honey, don't worry, mommy's still here. Mommy will, I'll be there the first thing tomorrow morning. I'll come and wake you up, and then sometimes I'd even say, what I do sometimes when you sleep? I come and I put a little kiss under your pillow. Like there's these wonderful storybooks out there where they talk about the kissing hand, or the other one that I really love is do you remember the title of that book, Martin? The with the yarn, with
The invisible
the
string.
invisible string. Thank you. It's such a wonderful story for children, and helping them hold on to mom and dad at night. I strongly encourage you guys to read those stories with your children. So the invisible string and the kissing hand. And so establishing a bedtime routine that is the same, that is predictable, really helps. And I understand it can't always be mommy or daddy that is available. Sometimes, parents will share the role to put their children, to bed. But I think it's important for them to understand that there's a predictability there. And so what pushes preschoolers buttons? I mean, Martin's already named so many things that push their buttons. But I had mentioned just before about separation being very difficult for them. And so nighttime is very scary, but also going to school. And so for those who, have never done daycare, or that have done daycare, but ever since they've been so little, so they've known the same place, it may not be as scary, it's familiar. But when they go to school for the first time, oh my goodness, all the novelty and how scary that is. And to let go of mom and dad for that long of a period, it's really way too long for them. Remember, I mentioned about their glass being very short. And so for them, their glass is not full enough, long enough to hold on to us for the whole day. And so children in the morning, I mean, I remember my daughter having a very hard time going to kindergarten the first day. And it took her weeks and weeks and weeks, and she cried. And even, I was very lucky because the teacher there was very intuitive. She allowed her to bring something to class. I mean, I understand with COVID, it's more tricky now, but she had allowed her to take something to class to hold on to me, that, whether it was a picture, it was something that smelled, from home, and that helped her to hold on. But we need to anticipate that the child will cry, will cling, will, especially at the beginning. And not all children are the same. Some have an easier time letting go and are excited to go to school. Their excitement to go to school takes so much space, especially those that they may have siblings that are already there at school. They've seen going to school with their brothers and older brothers and sisters, so it's not as new, it's not as scary. But for an only child or for the eldest, and for especially a sensitive child, a shy child, school is a very scary new place. And so
Mhm.
not to feel concerned. I mean, I remember I even had, when my daughter had started school, there was another parent there that the child months and months after was crying. And I remember other mothers trying to say to that parent in question, are you okay? Do you need any help? Do you want me to recommend you to a therapist? And I was like, whoa, like, wait a second, time out here. Like, it is normal still at that age to be reacting even months after. And so let's not worry. Let's be patient. Let's understand that this will come with time and each child has their own rhythm.
Mhm.
And so that's one big piece. The other big piece, and I think Martin alluded it to a little bit when we talked about pushing independence, for them to be, to do things on their own, for them to tie their own shoes, for them to walk on their own. Children have a hard time, especially at 4 years old, they have a hard time feeling like adults are pushing them to do things.
Mhm.
And you could see it by this picture, just by the stance of that adult, the way she's looking at the child, and you can see the little boy there with his hands on his hips. But they have such an allergy to pressure and coercion at that age. And so I think we need to be mindful about that this is natural, this is part of growing up. And part of the reason why they do this is because they're becoming their own person. And so in order to become their own person, they need space to find out what does Johnny want? What does Sarah need or want? And so when mommy or daddy or the teacher is putting pressure on you need to do this or you need to do that, and we do it in a bossy tone, or we do it with impatience, then this pushes their buttons. And so how can we be playful? I mean, Matson's been so amazing, this evening, about giving so many examples of using, in your tone and with games, on being playful. Like, for example, getting dressed in the morning.
Mhm.
Rather than saying, oh my goodness, Johnny, like, let's hurry up, like, time is ticking, we're late. It's more about, what are we going to wear today? Or how about you put on this sock and I'll put on that sock. And so doing it more in a playful way moves away from the pressure. The child doesn't see it in the same kind of in the same way. It's more playful. And so that's a
Sometimes,
big
Catherine, I'm thinking
yeah.
just as some examples there is like, like the getting dressed is, do you want the blue shirt or the green shirt? And do you
Yes.
want this or that? And they don't realize that they're actually in the process of getting dressed, that you are step by step moving them in that direction. And they
Yes.
think they're being the big bosses of their choices. It's, we would do that, especially at nighttime, where if I, is like, do you want a bath or a shower? And the issue, the question wasn't, do you want a bath? No, do you want a bath or a shower? So
Right.
your body is getting wet and washed, and then it's like this pajama, that pajama, and we even had it where my eldest was really didn't like water in his face, where we had swimming goggles, one
Love
that
it.
was a fish and the other one was frogs, and it was like, so it's like, who's taking the shower with you tonight? Tonight's a hair night, so is it the frogs or the fish? Like, take your pick. And he would get them on and off we went. But it was, he felt empowered
Yeah.
because he had a choice. But the reality is before he would have said, before he would say, I don't want to wash my hair, not tonight, not tonight. And I'd say, oh, so which is it going to be, the bath or the shower? And then is it the fish or the frogs? And he was making choices, but it was walking him 2 steps of it to make it
Yeah.
digestible. Did it take a little bit longer? Yes. But we didn't end up with screaming matches where you have a child in distress
Yeah.
doing, the bacon in the bathroom, and the parent who's like, oh man, who said yes to having kids, because there are times at night we're tired too. So
Yeah.
how can we sometimes make it a little bit easier for ourselves, is by flipping the energy. And it was more playful and we did enjoy it more and we did get the job done. So I think
Mm.
there are times where it's that little bit of energy that we need to shift can really make the whole process more enjoyable. Like getting to bed will actually be easier just because we flip the energy a little bit. So sometimes
Hmm.
it's that little of an investment where we need to say, he's tired, I'm tired. And there are nights where you might decide where, you know what, I can't do this today. And you might say, tonight is a faith class and the teeth, and we're going to bed because we're going to do it
That's it.
different. And that's okay. That's okay. And this is where, as a parent, you need to say, sometimes I need to give myself some breathing space
Yeah.
so that I can be playful and I can be, listening to my child's needs so that they're not feeling that I'm pushing them away. Because if I push them away and when I get to bedtime and want to say tonight, like enough is enough, then that doesn't work. That's when we get the alarm and the nighttime separation kicks in where they have a hard time. Yeah.
And to your point, Martin, another good example to fit into this is rather than focusing on now's the time to go to bed and put it in their face that, this is the last thing.
This is it.
That's it. It's sometimes even to put the focus on, do you want this story or you want that story? And so the child is focused more on the story, or would you like to have this type of massage or that type of massage? And
Yeah.
so just giving them options, first of all, but also keeping the focus on things that are not as scary or coercive. And it really does help and make the difference.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
The other thing that really pushes a preschooler's buttons is that they have a hard time with us expecting them to have mature behavior. And I think that we've named this many, many times. They do not do sharing well. Waiting turns is very difficult. Being patient. I mean, I remember my daughter, the second I'd be on the phone, second the phone would ring, I didn't even say hello, that already she'd be like, "Mummy, mummy, mummy." And I mean, for different reasons. One, because she didn't want to wait, but two, because my attention was not on her. It was now diverted onto the phone. And conflict is something that is very difficult for them to manage. And so if we expect them to be able to handle this, and that we then become impatient ourselves with them because they're not capable, then that pushes their buttons.
Mm.
It's I think the nuance that we need to make is not that we don't teach them these things or that we don't model these things, but we cannot have the expectation. It's kind of like the gardener, like Martin mentioned with the
Yeah, the
tomato.
planting seeds.
That's right. We're planting the seed and this will come. We need to be patient that development has a plan and it's going to happen, but it happens to its own rhythm. And so it
Mhm.
is totally normal and typical of the 4-year-old to still not yet be able to do these things. And so if we trip all over it and that we get upset with them, then what happens to them is that then they feel bad because of course they don't want to disappoint mommy and daddy. And then it doesn't become about them, you know, trying to do better. It becomes about them feeling worse that they're not able to be able to, meet the expectation that mom and dad or whomever has for them. And that could take a whole other direction.
And Catherine, here you mentioned the 4-year-olds, but I'm gonna say
Yeah.
all of our K5s
Yeah.
and even some of them into grade 1. So we need to, the preschooler stage is more of a describing children developmentally than an actual chronological age. So I think there's a part where that's like a growth process there. Yeah.
Right. Totally. And you did mention with pandemic, given that everybody is, stressed out,
Mhm.
that development has
Yeah.
slowed down. And so it could be expected that it may take even longer than that.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the nighttime, Deborah McManara has put together this wonderful infographic, sorry. And I'm just realizing, Matson, that there's another one too, and we didn't put it in this presentation, about daytime separation. So when the child goes to school, how can we help them hold on? So it's not about getting them to handle being alone. It's about how can we help them hold on to us when they're not with us physically. And so she gives
Mhm.
examples like, for having a shirt that they can sleep in that smells like a parent, or whomever that they're attached to. It could be a special song that the parent could even record, and that the child could, listen to it before going to bed, or that they could, they even have these really amazing,
Teddy
um,
bears.
sorry?
Teddies that when you squeeze them,
Yes,
it triggers the sensor thing inside where the parent has recorded a song or a story. So the
exactly.
child hears the parent's voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another one could be, and I used to do this with my daughter all the time. I would promise her when she'd go to bed that as she was sleeping, I would come in and check up on her, and I would put underneath her pillow. I used to call them kisses, but what they were was little hearts, or little love notes that I would put underneath her pillow. And so she would get excited to wait to the morning to be able to see them.
Mm.
And there's so many examples. I'm not going to read all of them, but once we start thinking this way, that it's not about getting that for them to get used to being without us, it's about them getting used to holding them, building deeper attachments to be able to hold
Yeah.
on to us.
Yeah, it's not about letting go. It's holding on in a deeper and different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get that sleep time is it's such a challenge for all parents because we're tired. It's the end of the day, and you know, especially if you have several children that you're doing the rounds to say goodnight to each of them. By the time that you're done with the last child, how much time do you really have for yourself, for your spouse, to have some adult time? I completely understand that. It is a very tough time, you know, in a parenting life. But trust me, because I know this now that my daughter's older, I miss those moments. I miss reading the extra story and having that extra cuddle. Now, you know, that she's more grown up, she's not asking it as much in the same way. So
Mm.
yeah. So, what can adults do in children's lives on a daily basis to support them? Now, as Matson mentioned, play is such an important central thing in children's lives. And we're so excited that the program has put more focus onto play. We did also want to emphasize the fact that at home too, I think we think that it's important that children get to play. And it's not just about playing at school or playing during the day. It is also about playing when they come back home at the end of the day. It's not the time to push them to practice their name, to get to know all their alphabet, to get to, you know, practicing writing or reading. This will come if we can pave the way and make space for play, and that if they are satiated with the play, the desire to learn will come on its own.
Mhm.
And so, you know, whether it's roughhousing or that it's board games or that movie night or whatever that is, the more that we could spend time with them playing, this is also a way that we tell our children that they're important to us, that we want to give them attention, that we want to focus on what they like. And, you know, there's such quality behind all of that play. And it's not that we need to do this, you know, ends on ends for hours, but if we're going to do this, let's fully invest ourselves and focus, you know, having that quality time when we are with them and having that play there. So we wanted to give you guys examples to kind of inspire you a little bit about different things that you could do. I mean, besides, you know, playing board games, movie nights, music and dance is such a huge one, and it helps on so many levels. I mean, one, it's fun, but also it helps for the release of the emotions, release of the stress from the day, and it's good as much for us
Moms
the
and dads
adults.
too.
Yeah, as much for us the adults as it is for our children. I mean, I remember on New Year's Eve, I had a dance party in the house with my daughter, and oh my goodness, I think I was having more fun than she was. And so I mentioned it briefly, but playing different games, and I see this important for a few different reasons. I think for one, it is so difficult at their age to lose. They're having a hard time, you know, and they have still the magical thinking about, you know, that they can win all the time. And so first of all, we get to practice losing, get to practice being disappointed, and all of that, but it's in play and it's okay, and you know, and it's not a big deal, but making space for that. But also about, you know, taking turns, about being patient, and so we get to practice all of these skills in the play mode. And then the other
Mhm.
thing that we really encourage is they don't always have to play just with mom and dad. I think it's important that when the grandparents come, that they get to play with grandparents or with the sitter or with neighbors or whomever it is that's available, you know, and that they get to play different games with different people.
Mhm.
Another way, and this is one of actually it's a picture, I'm just seeing it there, that's actually my basement there with the on the top right hand picture. My daughter and I had a fun time making a fort, and so, oh my goodness, you know, such a need for you know, having that bubble time, being kind of hidden there underneath the covers, underneath the pillows. You know, my daughter used to spend hours and hours playing in there, and you could do it
And
in so
add a
many
few
different ways.
flashlights.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I get it. It makes a mess in your, you know, in your living room and all of that, but it's worth it. Trust me. There's so much fun that happens in this. And believe me, when children are doing fort building and that they're playing underneath the fort, there is no request for doing screen time when they're doing forts. There's
Mm.
so much more fun there to be done than with the screens. Other examples to illustrate, baking, cooking together. Can we get them involved? Whether even actually part of this could even be gardening, right? Getting fruits and vegetables during the summer
Yeah.
prepped, helping to cut, helping to however they can to their level. It's actually quite amazing how 4-year-olds, I mean, I don't know, Martin, if you've seen any of these videos on YouTube or on different shows of 4-year-olds and what they're capable of doing with their hands and cooking and baking. It's
Mhm.
quite
And they
impressive.
love it. They love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And we need to not stress about a mess. Then we can teach them how to use a vacuum cleaner or a mop. And that's
yes.
more play.
Yes. And
Yeah.
one thing also that's huge in terms of the cooking and the baking is that, especially for those picky eaters that have a hard time trying out new foods, it is so much easier for them to try out foods that they've helped prepare,
Mhm.
because they've had their hands in it, they've been able to see it, and all of that. And so I do encourage you. I mean, it's so much fun. Yes, it's messy, but it is fun to have your children involved. Anything that's with playing dress up, creating your own puppets or doing puppet shows, costumes, and whether it's hats or glasses or whatever that is, their creativity is so amazing at that age. I don't even think that you need in any way, shape, or form to direct them. You just need to have the materials available, the space available, and they will go at it. I mean, they could take anything and make it something else,
Something. Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's huge, huge, huge. And so to spend time with them in that play mode. And so, Martin, I'll because since I'm sharing screen, I can't read the top there. I'll let you read the
Yeah.
top
So
of the
it's
slide.
here it says stay in. This is from the book Going on a Bear Hunt. So stay in charge even if you can't be in control. And this is where when something's not going, oh my God, I don't like how this is going. Say, you know what, I've decided that we're going to and go for it. Because then you can manage and turn into the skid. If there's something going on and you're going like this is like just going to get from bad to worse, like the kids are playing and it's not such it's not playing anymore, they're going at it together. Turn it into something that you can get back on top, and you can lead it out of that storm. And parenting is navigating
Yeah.
a lot of rocky waters. You are going to get wet. Not every day is going to be a good day. And I'm going to say, don't give yourself too much of a hardship, because tomorrow is coming and there are going to be more opportunities to try again. And I think this is where, I mean, I've had many parents say, oh, Martine, this was not my best day. And I'll say, you know what? No worries. I don't believe a parent gets up in the morning and doesn't try their best.
Right.
And sometimes we fall short, and that's all part of growing. We are growing as parents. You are growing as parents. You get to know them more. They are becoming incredible little beings. And that's the beauty of it. And tomorrow brings a new day. You've got lots of time to practice. You've got years ahead of you. So don't worry that today is going to transform them for life. No. If something did not go well, just say, tomorrow I do different. And that's exactly what we're asking for the kids, is encourage their efforts, as big and small as they may be, and give them that opportunity to try, and it's not always going to work out, and that's okay. We don't expect it to. Remember, they're 4 and 5 year olds, and they're only going to reach maturity at 25, 26, 27. So they've got lots of time to grow. We need to not rush that.
Mm. And the story, Martin, that we've selected for this slide is especially the right hand side there, where the parent with the child is going through the grass, and so, oh, grass, long wavy grass, we can't get over it, we can't get under it, oh no, we got to go through it. And so how can we make it playful, that when we're confronted with different challenges,
Yeah.
that I mean, like Martin said, we'll have good days and we'll have bad days, but let's keep our chin up and do the best that we can and move through the day. And we can't get them all, and it's the same thing for
If
them
you
too.
don't know this
Yeah.
book, I'm going to encourage you to go either get it and read it or
Mm.
check it online. I'm not going to tell you the ending, because if you don't know it, I want you to go for it. But there's a beautiful motto for families there, but I will not spill the beans.
Love it.
Okay, I'm just checking time, Catherine, so
Yep.
we can get to some questions.
Totally. And so this was just the end anyway. In terms of good development requires patience and faith, and that when we can train a child to do a lot of things at early ages, but we shouldn't mistake that for maturity. And so understanding that, the analogy of the caterpillar that turns into the butterfly. I can't read the top there, Martin.
It says, just as you cannot train a caterpillar to become a butterfly, you cannot train a preschooler to become an adult. And this is from Dr. Gordon Neufeld.
Love it.
Mm.
So did you want me to show really quickly the two websites before we?
I think we'll stop the recording. I'd like to take questions.
Sure.
And what we can do